All right, let's dive into one of the biggest, strangest paradoxes in all of military history. We're talking about a huge, decisive battle that on paper meant absolutely nothing, but in reality, it changed everything. This is the wild story of the Battle of New Orleans.
So here's the big question that hangs over this whole thing, right? How could a battle that was fought after a peace treaty was already signed end up defining a nation? I mean, think about it. The war is over, but this one fight becomes this huge cornerstone of American identity and even launches a president's career. How does that happen?
Okay, so check out this timing. It's just wild. The Treaty of Ghent gets signed in Europe on Christmas Eve 1814. The War of 1812 is, for all intents and purposes, over. But, there's no email, no telegraphs. News travels at the speed of a sailing ship. So just 2 weeks later, on January 8th, thousands of soldiers are lining up to fight outside New Orleans, and they have no idea. They're basically fighting in this bizarre historical blind spot.
So, to really get why this battle became such a big deal, you have to look at who was fighting. And let me tell you, on paper, this thing looked like a total mismatch. It was a classic David versus Goliath story for sure. I mean, look at this breakdown. It's just night and day. On one side, you've got the British, right? 8,000 professional soldiers. A lot of these guys were hardened veterans who had just finished fighting Napoleon. We're talking about arguably the best army on the planet at the time. And on the other side, you've got Andrew Jackson with this ragtag crew of about 5,700. It's an insane mix of state militia, a few army regulars, free men of color, actual pirates under Jean Lafitte, and even Choctaw warriors. Talk about an unlikely coalition. So the British, feeling pretty confident with their super professional army, they come up with this really sophisticated, really clever plan of attack. The idea was to hit Jackson's defenses from two sides at once and just completely overwhelm them.
And it was a pretty brilliant plan. Step 1, a smaller force would cross the Mississippi under the cover of darkness. Step 2, they'd capture the American cannons on the West Bank and then, get this, turn them on Jackson's own troops. Step 3, with the American line in total chaos, the main force would launch this massive frontal assault at dawn. It's a textbook pincer movement, and it should have worked.
The strategy was solid, the troops were top-notch, but this entire elaborate plan was about to come crashing down because of a few simple, everyday tools. And this, right here, is where everything starts to go horribly, horribly wrong for the British.
Okay, so here's the key detail you need to know. Jackson's guys were dug in behind this big, wide canal and a huge earthen wall they called Line Jackson. To even get to them, the British needed two things: fascines, which are basically big bundles of sticks to throw in the ditch so they could walk over it, and ladders to get up the wall. Simple, right? Well, the job of bringing that stuff to the front line fell to the 44th Regiment of Foot.
You can probably guess what happened. They forgot them. I'm not kidding. In all the pre-dawn darkness and confusion, the guy in charge, Lieutenant Colonel Mullins, he leads the 44th to the wrong spot on the battlefield. By the time they figure it out and race back to grab the gear, it's way too late. The main assault columns are already on the move, marching straight towards an impassable wall with absolutely no way to cross it.
And now you can just see how this one massive blunder turns into a complete disaster. As the morning fog starts to lift on January 8th, the stage isn't set for a tactical masterstroke. It's set for a bloodbath.
Just try to picture this scene. You have thousands of British soldiers, their red coats making them perfect targets, marching in perfect, disciplined lines across a wide-open field. They're thinking they're about to storm a weakened position, but instead, they're just stuck. The fog burns off, and suddenly they're completely exposed. The American cannons just open up, unleashing this absolute storm of grape shot. They can't go forward because they don't have ladders, and there's nowhere to take cover. It's a death trap.
And the results were just staggering. The British took over 2,000 casualties. The Americans, 71. Just 71. It's one of the most lopsided victories in the history of warfare.
And maybe the craziest part of all is how fast this all went down. The main British attack, the one that was supposed to crack the American line and take the city, was completely and totally shattered in about 30 minutes, half an hour.
The American fire was so unbelievably precise that it basically decapitated the entire British command structure. The top commander, Sir Edward Pakenham, was killed. His second-in-command, Samuel Gibbs, was mortally wounded. The army was left totally leaderless, just swirling in chaos, and the whole attack just collapsed.
Okay, so we've got this incredible, unbelievable victory. But let's go back to our big question, right? The war was already over. This battle didn't change the treaty one bit. So why do we even talk about it? Why does it matter? Because its real impact wasn't military. It was psychological. It was all about the American identity.
For a young country that was feeling pretty down on itself after a war filled with stalemates and, frankly, some embarrassing losses, the news from New Orleans felt like a lightning bolt. Finally, here was this huge, undeniable win against the greatest military power in the world. It kicked off what became known as the Era of Good Feelings, this massive wave of national pride. It completely wrecked the Federalist Party, who'd opposed the war and now just looked foolish. And of course, it turned Andrew Jackson into a superstar.
This one battle, more than anything else, created the legend of Andrew Jackson, the tough, no-nonsense hero who stood up for America. The fame he got from New Orleans was so massive that it literally paved his way to the presidency years later.
And a huge part of this myth was tied to the men Jackson led. A super popular song at the time, The Hunters of Kentucky, basically sold this idea that the battle was won by these rugged, backwoods riflemen who were just incredible marksmen. This image of the tough individual beating a professional army became a core part of the American story. And look, while the riflemen were definitely brave, historians are pretty clear. It was the well-placed, professionally run American artillery that did most of the real damage.
So this is the great paradox, right here. The reality? The battle was strategically pointless. The war was over. But the legacy? It created this powerful illusion that America had won the war with a knockout punch. It gave a young, insecure nation the confidence that it could go toe-to-toe with any of the old European powers. In the end, the feeling of victory was way more important than the actual facts of the peace treaty.
And that really leaves us with this final big question. The story of the Battle of New Orleans is a perfect example of how powerful a narrative can be. It shows us how a story, a myth, a feeling can shape a nation's destiny, sometimes even more than cold, hard historical facts. It makes you wonder, can a myth actually be more powerful than the truth? In this case, the answer seems to be a resounding yes.